Now, welcome to another lightning response video, where this time we got a question from Sachem, who asked, "Hey Thor, I know you and I too have enjoyed the complexities of Andor. Making both sides more human, I'm down for. My concern is that it could go too much like how the Mandoverse is treating the New Republic, and how Acolyte, which I didn't watch due to the red flags, which ended up right, tried to flip good and evil. I trust Gilroy as a writer, but he isn't really a Star Wars guy. The respect he seems to have does give me hope, though. Do you think Season 2 could go too far in trying to make things interesting that it damages the good versus evil narrative of the rebellion versus the Empire? Side note, to me, the Empire should mostly be evil because of Palpatine, his dark side influence, and tangential things like bullies looking for power. Thanks for the care you take in your work. God bless Thor and Naboo." And first of all, I do think Season 2 is going to go further, probably much further than Season 1 did, and Season 1 went pretty far, especially for Star Wars. But I mean, that is what Season 2s tend to do, right? They tend to push the envelope, and I would be surprised if things didn't get worse, if we didn't see our characters, the ones on the side of the rebellion, and probably some on the Empire side too. I wouldn't be surprised to see them put into more difficult situations, harder and harder situations, and having to make some really near impossible choices. Again, that's what Season 2s tend to be about, especially for a show like this one. We've even heard Tony Gilroy talking a lot about the Gorman massacre, that it is going to be a major plot point that spans 5 episodes, and where in the EU an Imperial ship lands on some protesters that were blocking a spaceport. This was actually done by Tarkin, but I don't think he's going to have anything to do with it here. Instead, I think the rebellion may actually, in a sense, be the perpetrators of the attack. I think they may be the ones that do something truly heinous while posing as Imperials. Because another thing we've heard talked about is that there is going to be a no Russian moment in Season 2 of Andor, and that is in reference to a mission from the game Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. Where, long story short, an American is framed for a terrorist attack at a Russian airport, and it is done in an effort to start a war between the two countries. And so if we put those two things together, it seems like, again, the rebellion, or certain members of it, maybe Saw Gerrera and his partisans, this could be what he does that is too extreme for the rest of the rebellion that we have heard about. I think there's a really good chance that they pose as Imperials and do something that causes or instigates the massacre. I think we have even seen a bit of it in the trailers, where we have seen this kind of protest going at it, but looks like it could be a spaceport. Before then, seeing plenty of stormtroopers rolling in, and then some explosions and people dying. And again, I think some way, somehow, it is going to be the rebellion that actually does it, that causes the massacre, and all in an effort to, ironically you could say, to show the galaxy just how bad the Empire is and that they need to fight back. It's their way to sort of shock people into action. This is even the event, according to the show Rebels, that finally breaks Mon Mothma, and she blames the Emperor, and then she flees and ultimately makes her declaration to form the Rebel Alliance. Now, do I think something like this would go too far? Would this blur the line between good and evil a bit too much for Star Wars? Which, yeah, has traditionally kept a rather stark contrast between the two, where it has been very clear who the good guys are and who the bad guys are, and the good guys, they don't tend to do bad things. And, well, that's a tricky question, and I can't say definitively one way or the other how I'm going to feel about it until I see it, and that's assuming this is even how it is going to play out, more or less. But I will say that one of the things that I have really enjoyed about Andor, or Season 1 of Andor, is that it does show just how hard it is to sometimes be on the right side, to be the good guys, that the bad guys, that evil, does not and will not fight fair. And it makes the good guys have to ask some very difficult questions from time to time, like how far are we willing to go to defeat evil? How much of yourself are you willing to give and sacrifice? Are you willing to become something potentially worse than that which you are trying to defeat? Which is basically what that brilliant speech from Luthen Rael was all about in the 10th episode. He's saying how he has gone so far now that even if he eventually wins, even if the rebellion eventually wins, he's done so much that the guy who started that fight, the person he once was long ago, he's gone. And it's hard to celebrate your victory when you yourself had to commit atrocities to achieve it. when you became just as bad as the Empire to defeat them. And one thing that needs to be kept in mind here when we ask this question of, is this going too far for Star Wars, is this is all being done, what the rebellion is doing right now is being done in the absence of the Jedi. This is what everyone else in the galaxy who isn't Force sensitive is reduced to, or how they are forced to fight against Palpatine and Vader, against two Sith Lords and their armies. Now, I'm not saying that necessarily makes it right to go so far, but you understand the impossible odds they are up against better than we've ever understood them before, I think. That's what I believe the show does so very well, making you feel the might of the Empire in a new and very menacing way. We feel that oppression more than we did in, say, the original trilogy, which doesn't do a bad job of it, but it doesn't go into, as I've talked about before, that kind of ground level view, that every man's view of the galaxy and how they are oppressed by the Empire, and how it's likely pretty much impossible for them, for the early rebellion especially here, for the good guys to win this fight fair and square. Again, especially without the Jedi around to sort of maybe level the playing field a bit. And so, no, I don't think, again, without having seen Season 2 yet, but I don't think this is going to go too far. It is going to push those boundaries, certainly, but I also think it helps show, like I was saying, it shows just how bad the Empire is, and just what has to be done in war sometimes to defeat evil. Basically, there are no good choices in war. You are going to get blood on your hands no matter what if you're going to win, and sometimes you have to do what you must to win. Which, yeah, even the Jedi have been known to say something like that. And again, this is showing what the people in the galaxy have to do without the Jedi. They have to compromise their morals a bit, unlike the Jedi, who likely wouldn't do that, other than that one time they agreed to attempt to assassinate Dooku, but whatever, we won't get into that one. But anyway, another question this brings up, and yes, it is one I've talked about quite a bit, but what if this show that does go pretty far in ways Star Wars hasn't before, what if it is extremely successful in terms of viewership as well as fan and critical reception? What if Season 2 of Andor is a massive success in pretty much every way, especially considering the recent difficulties Star Wars has had lately, with the declining viewership numbers on Disney Plus, which have gotten really bad with the last two shows in particular, those being The Acolyte, which leaned heavily into the whole Jedi and Sith thing, which is the core foundation of Star Wars, which is what so many people claim they want out of Star Wars, and yet it was bad, so people didn't watch it for that reason. But from their perspective, the Disney Lucasfilm perspective, they likely saw that people didn't gravitate towards the Jedi and Sith stuff, and they thought it was so bad that they actually announced they weren't going to do a Season 2 when they could have just said nothing at all. And then there was also Skeleton Crew, which was a show aimed primarily at a younger audience, or that was meant to be a very family-friendly show, shall we say? Which many will argue is also what the core kind of foundation of Star Wars is, something that is supposed to be family entertainment, that it is supposed to be for kids. And well, even though I thought it was a quite enjoyable and good show, and others seem to like it as well, the viewership numbers for it were apparently even worse than they were for The Acolyte. So if you're Disney and Lucasfilm, and your last two shows have been about the Jedi and the Sith, and then you had one that was for kids, for your target audiences, allegedly, and they were both duds, what do you take away from that? What do you think about that? And what happens if, a little over a year from now, the Mandalorian and Grogu movie comes out and that is a flop at the box office? What if the only bright spot you've had in recent years with your franchise that you spent $4 billion on has been Season 2 of Andor? What if it, again, gets some fantastic viewership numbers and is praised by both fans and critics? What do you take away from that, and how does it affect the future trajectory of your franchise? Do you lean more into stuff like Andor and less into other things? Or save the more family-friendly stuff for the animated shows? And what if you try to go even further with what you do next? And I'm not necessarily saying Game of Thrones further, but something even closer to that, further than what Andor Season 2 is potentially going to be. Which is not what I'm hoping they would do, or what I would even suggest that they do. But Disney is going to follow the money, and if the money is pointing at more mature Star Wars being where the money is, they might just give us something even more mature than Andor. Who knows what they're going to take away and what they're going to try to do after, again, assuming Andor is a big success, which I think there's a really good chance it will be. And even though I love Andor Season 1, and I'm very confident Season 2 will also be excellent, and that it will go darker than Season 1, I don't necessarily need or want everything Star Wars to be like Andor. I do think, and I talked about it in a video a couple days ago, that it's not a bad idea to, especially with the long form shows where people expect a little more complexity, I would say. But I don't think it's a bad idea for them to be a bit more adult oriented and to keep the animated shows as they are, something more for all ages audiences. But no, I don't think everything should be Andor. Best case scenario would be just make better shows and movies in general. I don't think Andor is good simply because it is mature in nature. It is good because it is written extremely well, and many of the other things they have done, no matter who the audience or the maturity level of it was, they haven't been written well outside of Skeleton Crew, which again I thought was pretty dang good, but no one cared or watched it because they just got done watching The Acolyte, which wasn't very good. And so to wrap it up here, I don't think I'm worried that Andor is going to go too far in Season 2. I'm more worried that its success, assuming it is successful, which I think it will be, I fear it will confuse Disney and Lucasfilm as to what makes it successful in the first place. Like I just said, I don't love Andor because it's dark and gritty and mature. There are a lot of things that are dark and gritty and mature. I love it because it is very well written and shows just how dark this time period is without the Jedi and what the average person in the galaxy is up against and how far sometimes they maybe have to go to fight back. It really shows just how bad the Empire was and what had to be done to fight it. But the thing is, not everything in Star Wars is going to be set in this time period against the Empire without Jedi. And so not everything needs to be Andor, yet at the same time, things can be a little more like Andor, again, especially when you make a TV series or a streaming series where the average person tends to expect a little more complexity, something a little different than just your fun action adventure, which works fine in a 2.5-hour movie, but doesn't work as well when you stretch it out over 10 or 20 or 30 hours, whatever the series may run. So yeah, not really worried Andor will go too far, just kind of curious what Disney and Lucasfilm might take away from its success. Alright, that is going to be all I got for you this time. Now it is your turn. Take to the comments below and tell me what you think about this one. Are you worried Andor Season 2 could go too far? Are you worried what that might mean for the future of Star Wars? Or you can always ask a question for a future lightning response video. Just start your comment off with "Hey Thor," ask your question. I try to get to it in a future video. But whatever the case may be, leave your questions or comments below. Let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.